obtaining 10x rewards. Reincarnated into a novel as a side character. By Winterdragon_1. Chapter 191. For now, he put the matter related to hearts aside and focused on the next thing. The abyssal arts he was presented with revolved around a sword technique that uses abyss energy as its foundation. It was expected since Evelyn had also learned a sword technique. There were no examples or descriptions given about how powerful it would be once mastered. The sword technique was called negligentis. Apparently, it was a technique derived from a part of the constellation of the Trident. Oliver exhaled deeply. His breath misted in the cool air, a visible manifestation of the weight of the revelation. He didn't feel as surprised as he had expected from such a revelation. He had already suspected that since there was a fantasy world like this, then there ought to be more planets out there with their own worlds. He felt that he had received this information quite easily, and it was indeed a burden that was quite heavy for him to carry. For the system to grant him a technique belonging to another civilization, or perhaps another world, signaled that there were worlds out there that had developed powers strong enough to be recognized by the verse. A spark of excitement flared in his chest, a fire kindled by the idea of such immense possibilities. His blood was boiling with excitement, but he suppressed himself from getting too carried away. In the end, he was still considered an ant in the grand scheme of things. Let alone the other worlds, he could not even boast about his safety in his own world. There were terrifying demons and exorcists that could topple the course of nature with their strength. He didn't know how they compared to vast powers outside, but he knew that it was a matter that didn't need his immediate attention. Right now, his goal should be to become stronger, strong enough to be free in this world, so that he could take actions without worrying too much about consequences and his safety. If he could not even reach that level, then there was no point in thinking outside. There were still many things that he could explore. The Abyss Sword Arts, Negligentis, had a total of 7 stages to master. This time, rather than the complete mastery of the technique, the system instead rewarded him with knowledge about all 7 stages and how he could train and progress through them. All the materials he would need, all the environments he might require, and the added conditions for using the technique were provided. He had received all of this information rather than the already mastered technique. This meant one thing, that the technique Evelyn had managed to learn, the first level of the divine sword arts, after its value was increased tenfold by the system, only amounted to the knowledge of the negligentis technique. Which essentially meant that the system had determined that the tenfold reward would only amount to this much. Usually, he would have been rewarded with a fully mastered technique ingrained in his muscles and memory. He was used to being handed power on a silver platter. This time, it seemed the system was nudging him toward a more difficult, but perhaps more rewarding, path. However, this time, the only thing he received was intensive knowledge about this mysterious abyssal art, negligentis, which surprised him. But nonetheless, since he had already received the full knowledge of the abyssal art, he did not mind. It was an extremely comprehensive sword art focused on the negative energy of the universe. Each strike from negligentis is like the concentrated force of a collapsing star, dense with destructive potential. In fact, just as its name suggests, the technique was derived from a dwarf star. From the information he received, he even got the exact space coordinates of the dwarf star. It is part of the constellation of the Trident. It appears in the north quadrant at right ascension 19 hours 91.41 minutes and declination 31 degrees 98.86 foot. Well, he doubted if this information would ever be useful to him, so he did not focus much on it. According to the technique, it requires me to not only forge my own sword but also grow it while mastering the art. The idea of forging and growing a weapon of his own, one that would evolve with him, sent a thrill of anticipation through him. Stage 1 is called Initiation of the Voidborn. The materials it requires are void crystal shards. Void crystal shards are basically remnants of shattered stars, found in the deepest voids of space. They are infused with primordial darkness. It's basically impossible for me to get such a thing. The first stage is insane. Well, it would have been impossible if an alternative hadn't been provided. According to it, a material called void dust can also be used as a replacement. This void dust could be collected from ancient meteorites that have drifted through the void of space for a certain period of time. These dust particles carry a faint trace of the void's negative energy and are easier to obtain and handle compared to the shards. I think I can find some on the auction market. Oliver pondered with a deep look on his face. His mind was already racing, strategizing on how to acquire the necessary materials. Interestingly enough, even the environment required for completing the first stage is something impossible for the current me to obtain. However, since it's like this, I can adapt another environment that I can find here. A moonless night. The initiation must take place under the cover of a moonless night, where darkness is at its peak. I would need to meditate in an open space. The stillness of the night will help me sync my mind with the negative energy in the surroundings. Ha ha ha, Oliver suddenly laughed aloud as he looked at the sky. The absurdity of the situation struck him, a boy, standing on the precipice of cosmic power, laughing under a sky indifferent to his ambitions. He had information about the later stages as well and knew just how absurd the environment would need to be in the future to master this sword art. Such a terrifying power. He said to himself, looking at his hand as a smartphone appeared in his grasp. Chapter 192. Opening the phone, he browsed through the auction market to search for void dust, but he could not find any, which made him frown. His brows knitted together as frustration simmered beneath the surface. Strange, there's no way the exorcists don't have it, but it looks like it's not available at the moment. His voice was a low murmur, as if speaking the words aloud might somehow bring the elusive material to him. He eventually submitted a post, asking for sellers willing to trade void dust with him. After that, he noticed a notification and opened it. User Yellow Snowman has outbid you. Amount, 10 million Neden. A flash of irritation crossed his face as his eyes narrowed at the screen. His eyes widened slightly, and he clicked his tongue in annoyance. User Yellow Snowman has outbid you. Amount, 10 million Neden. Non-flammable Gialaril. Current price, 10 million Neden. Time left, 2 months, 5 days. Bid? Yes/no. Yellow Snowman? He's also interested in this metal? Well, I'll place one last bid before calling it quits. I only have 20 million Neden, I can't compete with this guy right now. Not to mention, I don't want to owe Jenna either. So, one last bid. Yes. 11 million Neden. You have outbid user Yellow Snowman. Bid placed successfully. Notifications will be sent directly to your inbox. A sense of satisfaction washed over him as he saw the confirmation, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this could escalate further. With that, he searched for the next important thing, finding some clues about the city of Harlington, more specifically, about the cursed playground. His fingers moved quickly over the screen, driven by a mix of determination and curiosity. Scrolling through some articles, he found some news about the place. The city of Harlington. It was a city that was not too close to the capital but not underdeveloped either. Its streets were likely bustling with life, yet it existed on the periphery of the more significant happenings in the country. It could be classified as a Tier 2 city by normal standards. The city functioned normally, with barely any exorcists in the area. Indeed, exorcists weren't allowed to wander into normal human cities, causing chaos. The delicate balance between normalcy and the supernatural had to be maintained, after all. Only by obtaining a special permit from the Exorcist Union could exorcists be allowed into normal cities and towns. The Exorcist Union had strictly issued guidelines stating that exorcists were nothing more than guards, soldiers who would protect the human race from extinction. At least, to the normal humans living in the cities, that was what was portrayed. The normal humans, born without aspera or anything else, were considered the ones to progress the human race further in the future. Of course, this did not mean that the exorcists were not considered at all. In fact, the boundaries were quite well defined. Normal humans were typically considered preserved specimens. Yes, to the average exorcist, normal humans were a sort of guarantee that would ensure their race never went extinct. A safeguard should the front lines ever falter, ensuring humanity's continued survival. This meant that while exorcists would carry forth the legacy of humanity in future generations, the well-protected normal humans were considered the last resort. A last resort in case an all-out war consumed everything. It was clear that exorcists must take down demons if they were to be eradicated forever. Preserving their species in safe cities and towns was something that had been planned out since ancient times and had been followed ever since. The cities and other territories were considered sanctuaries for humanity to grow and prosper, while the exorcists at the borders fended off the demons, keeping them safe. It was a fragile peace, one that relied on the constant vigilance of the exorcists and the isolation of the normal humans. Naturally, this led to some disputes, but in the end, everything had worked out so far. The Exorcist Union placed special emphasis on keeping the relationship with normal humans as simple as possible. They did not want a war to break out between humans over one side being incited against the other for having Aspera and being exorcists. This was why it was necessary for exorcists in normal cities and places to maintain a proper and good reputation. A single misstep could lead to widespread panic, or worse, a rebellion against those who were meant to protect them. This had been extremely effective over time. After all, exorcists were still humans, humans with Aspera. It would be strange for them not to mingle and coexist together. And this was also why the Mystic Purge clan was so infamous and frowned upon by some exorcists. The Mystic Purge clan was a clan that cared about nothing other than hunting as many demons as possible. They neither cared about reputation nor the beliefs a proper exorcist should hold. They were indifferent, cold, and cruel, even to their own comrades. Their methods were ruthless, prioritizing results over relationships, leaving a trail of fear and respect in their wake. However, they were one of the strongest clans, and their strength spoke for them. Their actions had never been against humanity from the beginning. All of their moves, tactics, and everything else were for the sake of humanity. If any clan were to fit the definition of proper, disciplined, and unforgiving guards of humanity, then everyone would speak of only one name. The Mystic Purge clan. The clan that fit this term the most, the bloodthirsty hounds, the barrier that threatened to consume any enemy if they dared step close to human lands. A force of nature, relentless in their pursuit, their very name was enough to strike fear into the hearts of those who knew of them. This was why, while some held unfavorable opinions of the clan, more admired them as heroes. Nonetheless, it was clear that exorcists were not permitted to wander in normal human places without a proper pass from the Union, lest it caused chaos. Chapter 193. Once the permit was obtained, exorcists could visit normal human places and even establish businesses there with some documentation. Naturally, no one actually dared to stay there for too long due to the countless complications that accompanied it. In the end, they were still exorcists, and their main duty was to exorcise all evil. Not only that, but the normal human areas lacked the Aspera density found in places where most exorcists resided, not to mention the abundant resources. It was quite disadvantageous for an exorcist to remain in normal areas for too long. So, the city of Harlington was just a regular city without exorcists there to monitor it and any happenings. Oliver purchased a detailed map of the city, which cost him around 30 Neden, which he paid without batting an eye. Afterwards, he started making some plans about how he was going to approach the situation and the possible dangers as well. His mind raced, calculating the risks and strategies, trying to anticipate every possible outcome. After all, his main goal was not to spend too much time on these missions but to further his own growth away from the watchful eyes of the clan, especially a certain someone. Underscore 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 underscore. In the Mystic Purge clan's grand courtyard. A woman with ashen gray hair and piercing cold silver eyes was standing, staring at the sky. The air around her was still, almost unnaturally so, as if nature itself hesitated in her presence. There was an unexpected scene taking place at the moment. The clan was covered in gray clouds, an eerie atmosphere looming over their heads. While the whole clan was covered by a blanket of clouds, the sky above the grand courtyard was shining bright, devoid of a single cloud. The stark contrast seemed almost like a defiance of nature, a silent proclamation of the power within the courtyard. The woman was none other than Ophelia, her face like a piece of still art, without a change in expression as she kept staring into the empty sky. Her gaze was cold, detached, as if she were searching for something far beyond the clouds. Her hands were carrying a paper umbrella that looked delicate, as if it would break with a single touch. After a moment of uneasy silence, she muttered to herself. His destiny shifted again. Again? A voice sounded out from behind her, and looking back, there was a woman kneeling on the ground before her in an extremely respectful posture. The woman's head was bowed low, her breath barely a whisper in the vast courtyard. "My lady, may I be bold enough to speak?" The kneeling woman had short black hair and black eyes and looked extremely beautiful. She was wearing a formal uniform and white gloves. Her white uniform had a peculiar symbol of a cube-like object colored ominously on the pocket above her heart. Ophelia didn't reply, but the kneeling woman understood and said in a low tone, "This constant and continuous change in destiny is an indication of a singularity. If it continues, it might lead to—" She paused, leaving her sentence unfinished as she looked at Ophelia's back. The silence stretched on, heavy with unspoken implications. There was not a single change in Ophelia's expression, she looked like a robot. She observed the sky for a few more moments before extending her free hand towards it. Her fingers moved with deliberate grace, as if touching something only she could see. The kneeling woman watched eagerly and keenly as Ophelia's slender fingers bent and pointed towards the sky, nowhere in particular. Her cold, devoid eyes watched as the world distorted before her, revealing things unseen by anyone else. Her fingers stayed pointed towards the sky for a moment before she put her hand down without much change in her expression. However, the woman kneeling behind her spoke up. "My lady, did you interfere with his destiny?" Her voice was trembling as she looked at Ophelia's back with a reverent gaze, barely controlling herself. Adoration and awe warred within her, a testament to the power her mistress wielded so effortlessly. An unexpected variable. Ophelia spoke up, her voice cold and deadly, as if she was fiddling with something insignificant. There was an eerie detachment in her tone, as if she were merely adjusting the pieces on a chessboard. An obstacle that she simply tampered with a flick of her finger. "My lady, no, Mistress Ophelia, I am in awe of your unfathomable power." She bowed deeply before her, almost prostrating. Her forehead nearly touched the cold stone floor, a gesture of absolute submission. Ophelia didn't turn around, and her gaze remained affixed to the sky. The woman in uniform didn't move a bit from her kneeling stance either. She remained perfectly still, like a statue carved from reverence and fear. It was only after some time that Ophelia spoke up once again. "What about that?" Her tone was as cold as before, not a shred of warmth audible in her voice as she addressed the woman behind her. Each word fell like a drop of icy water, freezing the air between them. "My lady, I have prepared a detailed report about it." The woman paused momentarily before her eyes turned sharp. "It is as you expected, she is indeed connected to him." The black-haired woman clicked her fingers as a stack of papers floated in front of her before heading slowly towards Ophelia, who finally stopped staring at the sky. The papers floated before her, and one glance was all it took before the papers disappeared as if they were never there in the first place. She managed to read them in an instant, less than a second. A feat that spoke volumes about the unnatural power she possessed. The very next moment, an aura unlike any other descended upon the courtyard, a force so terrifying that the air itself seemed to shudder in response. The once serene environment transformed into a scene of utter devastation as the ground quaked violently. Rocks, trees, and even the very earth beneath them were mercilessly crushed under the unimaginable pressure. The aura was not just powerful, it was apocalyptic, a dark and primal force that defied the natural order. It was as if the entire world had been plunged into an abyss. Chapter 194. It was as if the entire world had been plunged into an abyss so deep that no light or hope could ever reach it. The weight of it was suffocating, pressing down with such ferocity that the very fabric of reality seemed to strain under the burden. shadows twisted and coiled, as if alive, writhing in response to the overwhelming force. The sky darkened as if consumed by her power, and a chilling wind swept through the courtyard, howling with a voice that spoke of ancient, unfathomable dread. The aura was unbelievably dark and powerful, almost threatening to consume the entire world beneath it. The black-haired woman trembled as she lowered her head, not daring to speak at that moment. Her body instinctively reacted to the overwhelming force. Every muscle in her body tensed, instinctively bracing against the crushing pressure. She did not dare to look up, not even for a fleeting glance. The pressure could have easily annihilated any ordinary exorcist, reducing them to mere dust and echoes of what once was. Yet, she remained unfazed, grounded by her absolute loyalty and unyielding resolve, though the effort it took to maintain her composure was monumental. Her breath came in shallow, controlled measures, the only indication of the immense strain she was under. His existence is necessary. Ophelia emphasized each word she spoke, or at least that's how it seemed. There was a chilling finality in her tone, as if the very universe would bend to her will. The black-haired woman kneeling could sense a twisted obsession her mistress was harboring behind her words, an obsession that clung to Ophelia like a shadow, dark and insidious. It was not an obsession born out of love or care, but something sinister and terrifying. Having been with her lady for as long as she could remember, she knew Ophelia better than anyone. She could read the subtle shifts in her mistress's voice, the undercurrents of thought that were invisible to others. She was certain of it just from the tone of her voice. Ever since Ophelia had met him after the demon hunt, many changes had occurred. She could sense Ophelia's dark obsession with Oliver growing, like a storm gathering on the horizon, inevitable and destructive. The air around Ophelia seemed to hum with latent energy whenever Oliver was mentioned, a telltale sign of the tempest brewing within her. She wanted to know what it was that her lady wanted to use her son for, but she never asked, knowing that no answer would be given. She was there to follow the orders her master gave her, no matter what. Ophelia's words were her commands, and her existence depended on her lady. She knew, after all, that there was no demon or human stronger than her lady. That knowledge was both a comfort and a curse, binding her to a fate she could not escape. She was aware of the great plan that her lady had been preparing ever since her daughter, the young Miss Nadia, was born. But after meeting Oliver, many shifts had taken place in those plans. The black-haired woman could tell that whenever she mentioned anything related to young Master Oliver, she could expect a strong response or emotion from her lady, who rarely expressed anything. In her eyes, which considered everything insignificant, only Oliver and Nadia could interest her. Their names alone could provoke the faintest flicker of emotion in Ophelia's otherwise icy demeanor. She, someone who could bend the world to her will, placed importance on two children? She had an inkling as to why Nadia was the chosen one, but she could not understand why her lady had suddenly selected Oliver as well. She knew that being born alongside the chosen one, he was supposed to serve a specific purpose and was thus left alive at that time. But now, it looked as if things had changed, and her lady had placed far more significance on him. Investigate her and his connection to her. She said a few ambiguous words, but the black-haired woman immediately understood and nodded. The aura instantly vanished as if it had never existed in the first place. The courtyard felt unnaturally still in the wake of the oppressive force, as if reality itself was catching its breath. Enter his life, observe every detail. Should he show signs of opening the path, report back. Understood, my lady. I shall thoroughly investigate the woman called Jenna Sullivan and her connection to young Master Oliver. Ophelia didn't turn around as the kneeling black-haired woman bowed once more before disappearing into mist. The mist swirled where she had been, dissipating slowly, leaving no trace of her presence. Oliver was unaware that such a scene had taken place. It seemed that Ophelia was slowly tightening her grip on him. He was leaving the clan to escape her, but was that really going to help him in the end? Underscore. Achoo. Oliver sneezed, startling the cat sitting snugly on his lap. Sorry about that, Zippy, he said, apologizing to the cat. Meow. Meow. The cat nodded as if forgiving him and rested her head against his chest as she closed her eyes once again. Her purring vibrated softly against his chest. Oliver looked at her with a hint of speechlessness in his eyes. The clan guardian was really dense. After all, what cat would nod at their owner while responding to what he said? Anyway, the cat was quite heavy. He could probably replace her with his training weights and still get some exercise. He chuckled at the thought, imagining himself doing push-ups with the grumpy cat perched on his back. Nonetheless, Sesha had been doing well in monitoring her growth. The cat seemed less fat. Later that evening, Oliver visited the eastern area of the clan, which he had never been to before. It was the place where the administrative work of the clan would take place before being sent to the central residential area for the involved elders' opinions. It was also the place where the exorcists of the clan would be assigned missions and special requests. Chapter 195. It was also the place where the exorcists of the clan would be assigned missions and special requests. One might question why the exorcists were required to carry out missions as part of the clan. But then again, money is a huge factor involved, though that's not all. Duty and discipline were equally significant, binding each exorcist to their responsibilities. These missions were all related to the state of the human world, all aimed at maintaining human lands. These missions were less of an order and more collections of requests made specifically to the Mystic Purge clan exorcists. The mission or request, each exorcist had their own term for referring to it, could range from anything to anything. Be it violent demon clashes at the border, attacks by heretics, or finding something like an artifact or a treasure. All of them were requested from the powerful exorcists of the Mystic Purge clan. It was evident from the numerous requests piling up that the clan had to filter through, showing how much people valued and trusted the skills of the Mystic Purge clan. Each request was a silent show to the clan's ironclad reputation and the desperate hope of those who sought their aid. Just the name of the clan alone could strike fear into the hearts of demons. Whispers of their name traveled far and wide, carried on the wind like a warning. The cruel, strict, and disciplined clan had been an ancient guardian of humanity, protecting it from the demons on the other side of the world. Their vigilance was unyielding, their presence a deterrent to the darkness that lurked beyond human borders. It did provide those living behind a warm sense of comfort. The clan was associated with power and a very high rate of perfectly completed tasks. Their success was not merely a record, it was a legacy, carved into the annals of history with blood and steel. So it was no shock that there were so many requests. Oliver was there to find a particular elder who would be assigning him a mission, as per the details he had, but now, looking at the noisy surroundings, he felt he would need to ask someone to help him find that elder. Of course, he was currently covering his hair and a major portion of his face with the cloak of darkness. Other than making his presence vanish, it also had the normal function of dimming his presence in such gatherings. The cloak's fabric seemed to absorb light, rendering him a mere shadow among the bustling crowd. If he dared to brazenly show his face around this area, he could imagine the chaos it would cause, considering how a main heir had personally visited the administrative branch without any escorts. It would be like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples of shock and speculation. He had left without informing Sesha. He did so to avoid her accompanying him. Now that she was his personal maid, it was not strange that she would insist on such matters. Normally, every heir had their own escort, whose duty was to maintain the heir's safety and fulfill their needs in daily life. However, Oliver did not trust that maid of his one bit and thus would never accept her as his escort. The thought of relying on someone who had ulterior motives was repugnant to him. Choosing an escort was an important matter considering they would be sharing a lifetime with you. It becomes even more necessary for them to be trustworthy. There was no way he would be willing to accept Sesha, a spy, as his escort. That would be too ridiculous, after all. Well, he had a lot of time to decide on an escort for future events. The idea weighed on him, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. As he was contemplating and observing his surroundings, he noticed a small commotion taking place at the entrance from where he had come. He briskly walked towards the area and saw a group of exorcists dressed in pitch-black uniforms bearing the symbol of the Mystic Purge clan. They were official exorcists of the clan, and at the moment, they were in a group of 5, heading towards the counter where an elder was scrambling with missions and papers. He heard whispers around the crowd about the group of 5. He focused on the whispers and gradually understood what the commotion was about. Apparently, the group before them was a famous exorcist team consisting of powerful exorcists. Not only did they hold an extremely potent reputation, but they also induced fear and awe in the crowds wherever they went. Their very presence seemed to cast an invisible force, as if they carried with them the weight of countless battles. The commotion was about the recent deed they had accomplished. Did you know? It's a hot piece of news. After the insolent act of targeting the major clan's heirs, the Unholy Sun sect was hunted madly by the forces of the 5 clans, and from our clan, their group contributed the most. I heard they managed to take down 5 of the Unholy Sun sect's saints on their own. Serves them right, they had it coming. To be so daring as to challenge the great clans? They were simply seeking death. The speaker's voice was tinged with satisfaction, as if justice had been served. Humph. I heard that a majority of their bases have also been taken down, and all the heretics were brutally exorcised. Well, yes. They would not be offered a chance for redemption after performing such a stunt. The clans will definitely be rewarding the participants of the hunt with great rewards. Ah, I was so busy that I could not take part in it. I am envious. Oliver heard and sorted the murmurs calmly. So, the Unholy Sun sect had already been destroyed to such a degree in such a short amount of time? The efficiency and ruthlessness of the clans were impressive, if not unsettling. He expected nothing less of the influence of the clans. No matter how deeply these heretics were hiding, the forces of the clans still managed to sniff them out easily. Not to mention, the clans were using the Unholy Sun sect to set an example for other active heretics, warning them not to dare to look at the heirs of their clan ever again in the future. The clans were using the Unholy Sun sect to set an example for other active heretics, warning them not to dare to look at the heirs of their clan ever again in the future. It was an effective move. But Oliver knew that the sect master of the Unholy Sun sect was not someone who could be easily found. He was probably still hiding away from the prying eyes of the clans, a dangerous heretic lurking in the shadows, biding his time. Well, given the fact that he knew the disaster beast egg was in the hands of some exorcist, there was no way he would let himself be exorcised. Oliver turned his head and looked at the group of exorcists who had contributed the most. The small group consisted of 3 men and 2 women. All of them were dressed in proper uniforms, and from his angle, a tall man seemed to be the leader of the group by the way he moved forward. There was an air of authority about him, his movements sharp and decisive, marking him as someone used to command. Their movements were well-defined and coordinated, even in such a place. Just as Oliver was staring at them, one of the 2 women in the group turned around and looked in his direction. It was at that moment when their eyes suddenly met. Oliver quietly withdrew his gaze since the woman had already seen him. He kept his expression neutral, though a flicker of curiosity stirred within him. It might look rude to the other party, after all. However, even though he had retracted his gaze, he could still feel her eyes fixed on him. It was an unsettling sensation, as if she were peeling back layers to see what lay beneath. To confirm his suspicions, he moved around, away from the group, but he could still feel her gaze following him. Each step felt heavier under the weight of her unyielding attention. Unable to bear it any longer, he looked back and met her eyes once again. His eyes seemed to question why she was so insistently staring at him, but the other party did not show much reaction. Her face remained impassive, her gaze steady, as if she were trying to decipher a puzzle. Oliver shook his head and decided to leave for the moment and look around for the person he was supposed to receive the mission from. As he left the premises, the gaze also vanished from his back. Just when he thought he had finally managed to shake her off, he was blocked by a tall shadow. Looking up, it was the same woman who had been staring at him earlier, and now she was blocking his path. "What is it?" he asked in a calm voice. He kept his tone measured, hiding the irritation that simmered beneath the surface. The woman kept staring at him under the hood as he looked back at her. Her features were striking, with long brown hair and green eyes full of life. Suddenly, the woman kneeled on one knee before him and said in a resolute voice, "Young master." She looked at him. "Why are you here alone without your escort?" Her tone indicated a level of respect that she bore towards the main family, not particularly towards Oliver but towards his status instead. It was the kind of respect ingrained through years of discipline and tradition. Nonetheless, she used the term because she was not aware of who he was out of the many heirs. An heir walking around without any escort was not only unsafe but also quite disrespectful to themselves as well, generally. This was not the central or residential area of the clan, and walking around without any escort was not looked upon lightly. Not only did escorts show off the heir's potential with their strength, the stronger the escort, the more precious the heir was to the clan, but they also demonstrated the ability of the heir to command such a person. Anyways, right now, he had other things to deal with. "I am here secretly, no one knows of it," he told her simply. His words were clipped, trying to convey the finality of the matter. "This, young master, if the elders learn of this, they will be furious." The woman wore a complicated expression as if not knowing what to say. Her brows furrowed slightly, concern etched in her features. "They won't know as long as you don't open your mouth. Moreover, I have a reason to be here too. Once the matter is settled, there will be no issues." Oliver glanced at the woman. To be able to find his identity just by looking at him once, he didn't know how she did that, but since she could see through the cloak of darkness, it must mean she was quite powerful. He made a mental note to remember her. Someone with such sharp perception would be valuable, or dangerous, depending on the circumstances. "Young master, forgive me for being bold, but after the recent attack on young Master Oliver by the heretic sect, you should not be careless when there's an increased risk of retaliation from the remaining forces of those heretics." The woman spoke with a tone of hidden disgust. Her lip curled slightly as she mentioned the heretics, her disdain barely concealed. "My team and I have been actively exorcising these pests, however, they are quite tenacious and good at hiding. It is best not to be careless even within the clan." Her words implied that even she, who was stronger than him, would not underestimate those heretics easily, and he must not do so at any cost either. "All right, I will keep your words in mind," he said, since he could tell she was very loyal to the clan just from the strain in her voice. There was a sternness in her tone that spoke of her dedication, a trait he couldn't help but respect, even if only slightly. "I will leave as soon as I am done," he told her. "Young master, if I may ask something?" She interrupted as she looked at him trying to meet his eyes through the fabric of cloak. Chapter 197. What does the young master wish to accomplish? Please tell me. With my influence here, it would be completed instantly, she spoke up. Of course, she did not mean to boast about her influence in front of an heir, but since the said heir was in disguise right now, she was suggesting using her reputation to have his work done quickly. After that, I will personally escort the young master back to the central area, she said in a serious voice. Oliver inwardly shook his head. This woman was quite persistent. She was insistent on sending him back no matter what, for some reason. It was as if her sense of duty was etched into her very soul, overriding any consideration for his autonomy. What sort of unreasonable loyalty was this? Come to think of it, she must have already been brainwashed by the clan. As if he remembered something, his gaze turned subtle. The clan was infamous for employing the cruelest of means to achieve what they wanted for the sake of humanity, even if those actions included forsaking the very thing they sought to protect. A bitter irony that was not lost on him. The methods of the clan were among the worst. All the official exorcists and members of the clan were deeply loyal, their hearts and minds engraved with devotion to the clan, even if it meant sacrificing their lives. The severe principles and training they underwent were all intended to completely brainwash the members into being solely devoted to the clan's prosperity and progress. The cost of such loyalty was a terrifying efficiency, coupled with a complete disregard for personal freedom. I have already said that it is a private matter. I do not need your assistance, and I believe you will keep this matter under wraps, he said in a firm tone. The woman didn't even flinch under Oliver's gaze and calmly closed her eyes. Her composure was unnerving, as if she were a stone statue, unyielding and cold. I understand, young master. She nodded once and got up, leaving him alone shortly after. Damn, now I need to hurry up. She's definitely going to snitch on me. Oliver's eyelids twitched as he watched her fading back. He knew for sure that she was going to inform the elders from the clan as soon as possible. The elders would naturally not let a young heir accept any missions or requests easily, no matter how much he insisted. Plus, there was a risk that they would let Ophelia know about it too. He dared not imagine what she would do after that, given how she reacted after the demon hunt just by seeing his Aspera. She was crazy. Now, where in the world is that person supposed to be? He glanced around and moved in a certain direction to inquire about him. Underscore. Meanwhile, back at the mountains, Allison was deep in thought as she looked at the terrain before her. It doesn't make sense. Her voice was a soft murmur, almost drowned out by the silence of the wilderness. Ever since the heretic attack, she had been seriously investigating the traces and remains of the battle that transpired. As Oliver had told her, there was a masked man who had jumped in to help them. It could very well be a secret guardian from one of the clans responsible for protecting the heirs. She had been trying to uncover the truth, knowing there was more than what met the eye. Even if it was a guardian, there was no reason for them not to meet her and then disappear. Plus, there was something even more suspicious in this case: Oliver's nonchalant behavior, the confusion among the children, and more. It's a fairly dangerous poison. Her fingers traced the charred ground, feeling the residual energy still clinging to the earth. She bent down and traced her finger on the charred ground. This was the place where Oliver fought with the old man who was using poison. She could detect faint traces of dark Aspera and poison still lingering from the aftermath of the battle. Allison's senses were sharpened to the extreme, especially when it came to tracing such Aspera outputs. Her eyes narrowed, focusing intently on the faint remnants, piecing together the scene in her mind. But she frowned as she looked ahead. Why are there traces of Oliver's Aspera only here? She looked at the destruction ahead with a dazed expression. The ground was literally obliterated as if someone had forcefully destroyed it, and there were no visible signs of corrosion from the poison either. It was as if a concentrated blast had wiped out everything, leaving no trace of the poison's typical lingering effects. Oliver had the water element as far as I know, but clearly, from the charred state of the ground, a variant of the fire element was used in this. She pondered, but as he said, there was a masked man helping them out. Then he should have left some Aspera traces, and there's no way I would miss them. However, there's absolutely nothing other than Oliver's faint Aspera signature. Her brow furrowed deeper, the mystery gnawing at her. How can there be no traces of the heretic's Aspera? It's as if they have vanished out of existence itself. The thought sent a chill down her spine, the implications unsettling. She narrowed her eyes and made a bold guess. Could it be that Oliver was lying? Her heart raced at that possibility, since if what she thought was true, then there was only one possible scenario that could have happened when the heretics attacked. He defeated them alone. This was an absurd statement that even she herself would never believe if someone said that to her. Oliver had just entered rank 1, and the heretics who attacked were clearly rank 2 by all means. Especially Jetiah, one of the saints, who was strong enough to be categorized as rank 3. She did find the traces of 2 heretics out of the 4 who attacked, but she could not understand why the traces of the other 2 had disappeared like that. Chapter 198. Not only that, but she had also concluded that one of the heretics was not dead but had escaped due to unknown circumstances. Her gut instinct, honed by years of experience, told her that this situation was far from ordinary. If there was really a strong guardian protecting the kids from the shadows, then there was no way they would have let one of those heretics escape, further convincing her that something was wrong. She knew for sure that the heretic was still alive, she had the ability to tell. She had sent Sigfur to look for her as his punishment for being careless. So far, there had been no reports from his end. She stroked her chin, deep in thought. Oliver had always been a bit of an oddball ever since he came under her care. From having mysterious means to veil his aspera to a strange resistance to the fire element, something was definitely amiss here. And she believed it was definitely linked to him in one way or another. She would have to investigate in depth to know exactly what was going on. Come to think of it, I still owe the two their apology gifts from that time. Her lips curled into a faint smile as she remembered her promise when she had accidentally thrown the sword-wielding kid. A great chance to meet up with him again. What should I gift that little student who seems to be hiding important stuff from his teacher? Allison fell into thought with a small smirk tugging at her soft lips. So, young master, here is the mission request and the badge to allow you special entry on behalf of the clan. A middle-aged man handed Oliver the mission details and the special badge that was used to prove both his identity as an exorcist from the Mystic Purge clan and to allow him to leave the clan. However, young master. The middle-aged man paused, looking at Oliver's hidden face, and said, "Are you sure you want to do this? There are many risks involved, and if..." He didn't continue, but the meaning behind his words was clear. If this matter reached the ears of someone higher up, all of them would be in trouble. "Don't worry, I've decided." Oliver reassured him and got up, ready to leave. That woman might have already reached out to an elder by now. He should leave before they arrived. Also, young master, here. The middle-aged man stopped him momentarily and handed him a talisman. This is... Oliver looked at the talisman in doubt and asked. "This is something prepared by Mississippi. She asked me to hand it to you before you leave. If you encounter any danger threatening your life, just use this talisman. As for its use, she didn't tell me." The middle-aged man smiled awkwardly, but Oliver nodded and thanked him. Afterward, he quickly made his way back to his courtyard and prepared to depart. Packing up, he quickly sorted out the essential materials in his mind space and then strode out of his courtyard casually. He could see Seshatortu, training the fat white cat, and walked past them as if he was going out for a stroll. None of them reacted much upon seeing him, since he was wearing casual clothes and had nothing on him. It was normal for him to visit the market a few times a week, so they both did not suspect anything and continued what they were doing. Oliver had no intention of letting the two know his whereabouts, or else they might start following him and eventually learn his secrets. After making sure he had left the central area behind, he took out the same old white faceless mask, put it on, and headed toward the clan exit with brisk, hurried steps. He had a sinking feeling in his heart, as if he was being watched. He didn't dare to be careless and suspected that it might be ordinary secret guards placed around the clan. Despite his courtyard being heavily guarded, he never really allowed anyone to follow him anywhere, fearing being monitored. Soon, he reached the clan's main gate and saw multiple expensive cars nearby. It was clear that many exorcists knew how to drive and used these cars. He walked up to the buff-looking guard at the entrance and showed him the mission badge. The guard paused, silently scanned the badge, and then scrutinized Oliver sharply. Oliver could not help but feel goosebumps. The guard was dangerously strong, given that he was the gatekeeper. In the distance, he could even see some demonic beasts stationed as well. It was heavily guarded. "Mission?" The buff man spoke in a heavy voice. Oliver simply nodded and didn't speak. The guard did not ask him further despite the suspicious mask he was wearing. It was common for different exorcists to have weird tastes. An exorcist wearing a mask to conceal their identity was not that rare. "You may pass." The buff man handed the badge back, and the heavy metal doors that seemed as tall as the clouds slowly opened wide. Oliver took the chance and swiftly made his exit, finally escaping the clutches of his clan for the first time. He immediately took out a map of the clan's outer area and navigated toward the normal human areas. He was planning to book a taxi once he was a bit farther from the clan. He ran at great speed and soon left the clan behind. Once he was sure he had covered a considerable distance, he opened his smartphone and browsed through some features. Apparently, he could book a ride if he went a little farther north, which would directly take him to the human cities. Oliver's eyes narrowed as he saw the ridiculous price but still booked it. If he were to travel on foot, it might take him months to reach his destination. A ride was faster and more comfortable. Chapter 199. Soon enough, after traveling a little further north, he spotted a small black car with tinted windows, making it hard to see inside. The sleek black exterior reflected the dim light of the overcast sky, giving the car an ominous presence. As Oliver approached the car, a woman emerged from it, looked at him, and then at the smartphone in her hand. "You are the customer?" "Indeed." Oliver took out his smartphone and scanned the details. The soft glow from his phone screen illuminated his face, highlighting the intensity in his eyes as he confirmed the transaction. After confirming everything, she opened the door for him and got into the car herself. "Well then, sir, your destination is the city of Harlington, right?" His response was curt, his focus already drifting elsewhere. Seeing that he didn't seem interested in chatting, the driver quieted down. The silence between them was thick, only broken by the low hum of the car's engine. "It will take approximately 2 days before we reach the city," she calmly told him and focused on driving. The car sped up extremely fast, but from inside, no one could feel any tremor or discomfort, as if the car was moving very slowly instead. It was unnervingly smooth, the speed betraying the lack of sensation, making it feel like they were gliding over the road. Oliver didn't say anything to her and opened his phone again, starting to browse. According to the article, the latest moonless night should be in the next 5 days. After that, it will appear only after 7 months, so I need to practice and form the negligentus on that day. Given his travel plans, he would have only 3 days to prepare. Otherwise, he might have to wait 7 months to even consider forming it. The issue related to void dust had also been resolved when he met with Jenna last time. Although he was now in her debt, he really needed the materials, so he agreed for the time being. A slight frown crossed his face at the thought of being in her debt, but he quickly pushed it aside. At most, he might have to run an errand for her in the future. The rest of the journey was smooth. He half expected to be ambushed by thieves or bandits but realized he was overthinking. The paranoia from living in a world filled with constant danger had become second nature, always expecting the worst. Not only that, but it seemed like the clan wouldn't be able to take him back forcefully now. Not that they had a reason to. He believed they might send someone to keep an eye on him if things got worse. What he was most worried about was Ophelia's reaction to him running away from the clan so secretly. The mere thought of her discovering his departure sent a chill down his spine. He could only hope she would stay put until he gained some strength. He was also concerned about Nadia. But there wasn't much he could do about it, he had never been great at talking or maintaining relationships. He had a sister, but she was nothing like the cold block of ice Nadia was. Nadia's coldness seemed impenetrable, like a barrier that separated her from the warmth of human connection. Well, I wonder how much the plot has progressed so far. With Evelyn learning the first level of divine swordsmanship, she would be going through a clan trial, just like the one he went through during the demon hunt, though something different for her clan. At that time, some elders of her clan conspired against her, and she was badly wounded. But, as luck would have it, she persisted and still won the competition in the end. The memory of her victory, against all odds, was vivid in his mind, Evelyn standing tall amidst the chaos, bloodied but unbroken. Then she proceeded to humiliate the elders and their children, leading to a long conflict within the clan itself. "Well, I have nothing to do with that," he muttered softly to himself, dismissing any notion of getting involved in that mess. Oliver felt somewhat relieved. He couldn't imagine getting involved in that chaotic mess. Not only had he taken up a mission request from the clan, but the destination was far away as well. There was no way he could get associated with the Celestial Paradox clan there. Suddenly, he shivered. He didn't know why, but a bad feeling came over him. His gut tightened, a familiar sense of foreboding creeping up his spine. No. There's no way that can happen. He forcefully shook his head and decided to focus on preparing for the moonless night in 5 days. There were too many variables to dwell on his fears now, he had to stay sharp. Well, he would only have 2 days to prepare. I should first get a hotel to stay in, then scout for a safe place with no distractions. He wondered if he had enough money left for the hotel stay. He seriously needed to find some ways to make money, too. He wasn't too worried, though. With his knowledge of the plot and now that he was out, he could gradually start investing in things that would explode exponentially in the future. The future was like a chessboard laid out before him, and he knew exactly which moves would yield the highest returns. Not to mention, he was heading to the best place for it, the normal human cities, where things developed and worked in a predictable way. The rest of the journey was spent in silence. Oliver didn't talk and kept scrolling through his smartphone, looking at current affairs and getting a deeper understanding of the world. Each news article and update was a piece of the puzzle, slowly revealing the state of the world outside the clan's control. Chapter 200. The lady wasn't an ordinary driver either. Oliver had used his special eyes on her before getting into the car. She had some aspera in her body, although not as much as him, but still more than the average human. A faint shimmer of energy pulsed around her, barely noticeable unless one knew what to look for. The faint glow of her aspera had caught his attention for a brief moment, but he dismissed it as unimportant. Apart from taking a few breaks, they soon reached their destination. The city of Harlington. Oliver looked at the city with interest. It was just like any modern city, but with more advanced technology incorporated. Sleek towers of glass and steel reached into the sky, their surfaces glinting in the late afternoon light. The hum of machinery and the distant sound of traffic filled the air, a contrast to the serenity he had left behind. Towering skyscrapers loomed on the horizon, sleek and shining, a testament to human innovation and progress. Each building seemed meticulously crafted, blending both function and elegance, a symbol of humanity's rise in an otherwise chaotic world. He could see the tall gates at the entrance of the city. The material the gates were made from was not ordinary either. The gates gleamed under the city lights. It was clearly designed to fend off any antisocial invaders or heretics. Oliver watched as the woman drove up to the gate and was stopped by the city guards, who asked her to show verification cards. Oliver was also asked to show identification, but since he didn't have any, he decided to show the mission badge bearing the symbol of the Mystic Purge clan. Looking at the intricate design carved onto the surface, the guards were momentarily stunned before regaining their senses. The delicate carvings and ancient symbols seemed to glow under the dim light, as if holding a power that transcended time. They quickly bowed deeply, almost at a 90-degree angle, to show the utmost respect. Their earlier stern expressions melted away, replaced by a look of awe and reverence. Their bodies stiffened, as if suddenly aware of the sheer authority and danger that came with Oliver's rank. Sir Exorcist, please grace our town," the guard stuttered, speaking in a low and respectful tone. His voice wavered, betraying the sudden shift from authority to deference. His voice shook slightly, betraying the intimidation he felt in the presence of someone from the Mystic Purge clan. It was a clear contrast to his earlier stern expression. Even his posture was now straight and full of respect and attention. He seemed almost smaller now, humbled by the presence of a clan member, and desperate not to offend. Despite Oliver looking no taller than a 10-year-old, the guards dared not underestimate or be disrespectful to him at all. They knew a bit more than the common people. Exorcists had all sorts of magic and tricks to alter their appearances, and it would not be surprising if this small-looking kid was a 100-year-old veteran expert. They had heard of cases where being disrespectful to such exorcists would later result in the victim getting cursed or devoured by demons at night. No one took exorcists lightly. Of course, exorcists would never admit it, lest they draw the rage of the exorcist union. A silent code of conduct existed among the exorcists, one that civilians could only speculate about. The guards quickly shuffled back and forth, clearly flustered about what to do since they had not been informed that an exorcist would be visiting their small city like this. The female driver was also speechless. She didn't expect her customer to be someone from one of the 5 great clans. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as she processed the revelation. Who would have imagined that a prestigious exorcist would hire her ordinary car services? If she remembered correctly, the cars in the Mystic Purge clan were extremely luxurious and way more comfortable than her small car, so why would he hire her? It also made sense to her now why he had such an aloof temperament and cold aura radiating from him. The pieces clicked together in her mind, each interaction with him suddenly making more sense, though it also heightened her anxiety. It was fortunate that she hadn't blabbered much on the way, or else she might have mysteriously disappeared during the journey, given the notorious reputation of the clan. Her pulse quickened at the thought, the horror stories she had heard of the Mystic Purge clan flashing through her mind. This, sir, she fidgeted and looked at him, not knowing how to ask about her payment from this exorcist without coming off as disrespectful. I know. Find a decent hotel for me, and I will add a tip for you, he casually said and went back to sit inside the car, leaving behind a stunned driver. His voice was casual, but there was an underlying finality to his words, giving her no choice but to comply. Now she must find a hotel for this esteemed exorcist? She was just a simple driver, since when was it her job to arrange for her customers' lodgings? Her mind raced as she considered the strange turn of events. This was supposed to be a simple ride, and now she was responsible for housing a member of one of the most dangerous clans in the world. She felt depressed, but she could not refuse the exorcist anyway. Well. She sighed under her breath, resigned to her fate. She opened up her smartphone and browsed through the hotels suitable for the exorcist inside. Her fingers moved quickly, trying to find something that wouldn't insult his status. But in the end, she found that the city lacked any extravagant and lavish hotels. She naturally assumed that someone from the Mystic Purge clan was used to high-end hotels, but this city didn't seem to have any. A wave of frustration hit her. How could a city of this size not have anything suitable for such a high-ranking guest? Chapter 201. She could only give up and look for other arrangements for the proud exorcist sitting inside the car. Her fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled through her phone, feeling the weight of her unusual responsibility. Sigh, why do I have to do this? The thought echoed in her mind, a mix of frustration and resignation settling in. In the end, she found a relatively good-looking hotel with a lot of reviews and booked a room for him. As for the duration of the stay, she put that on hold and let the exorcist inside decide it there. Not bad. Oliver looked at the average hotel of this world, which was just like any normal hotel. His eyes scanned the building, noting the modest architecture and the simple yet functional design. It wasn't luxurious, but it would do. He glanced at the driver, and she shrank slightly. Her posture instinctively shifted, as if anticipating either praise or critique. He added, "Good job." He opened his smartphone and paid her the money and the tip he had mentioned earlier. "Many thanks. Great exorcist. Please use my services again in the future." Her voice was now lighter, filled with excitement at the generous payment. The tension she had been holding melted away with the promise of future work. She bowed excitedly as she saw the handsome tip in her account and quickly escorted him inside the hotel to the reception before leaving. Her footsteps were quick, almost skipping, as she hurried to exit after ensuring everything was in order. Her earlier nervousness melted away, replaced by the thrill of having served such a prestigious client. The staff inside was also extremely respectful, either already informed by the guards or the driver. Their eyes widened slightly at his presence, whispering amongst themselves as they recognized the emblem of the Mystic Purge clan. He skipped all formalities and went directly to his room. The hushed voices behind him faded as he made his way down the dimly lit corridor, his focus already shifting to more pressing matters. Upon reaching his room, the first thing he did was scan for any abnormalities or recording devices. His eyes glowed faintly as he scanned the surroundings, his senses sharpening to detect any unwanted surprises. Every corner of the room came into view with a clarity that bordered on the supernatural, his heightened senses ensuring there were no hidden threats. Although he was sure they would not dare, he still preferred to be careful now that he was out of the clan. He was still wary of the unholy Sun sect. He had missed the heretic woman at that time, and although he had destroyed her mentality completely, he still couldn't afford to be careless. A flicker of unease crossed his mind, reminding him that even shattered minds could find ways to strike back. The memory of their encounter flickered in his mind, reminding him that loose ends could always come back to haunt him. With the countless sinister methods of the heretic sects, they might extract some information on him and his identity. Right now, the heretic sect, or what was left of it, was hiding in fear and would not dare to show in public for years to come, in fear of drawing the wrath of the major clans. But fear wasn't always enough to stop desperate people, and desperation made enemies unpredictable. But the disaster beast egg was still with him, and those heretics' lives were controlled by demons behind them on the other side of the world. They might just force them to continue searching for the egg. So he had to be careful at all times. After making sure everything was safe, he decided to start with a small search of the city, especially where the artifact was suspected to be. The city is really similar to how it was in my original world. There was a wistfulness in his voice, a faint memory from a life that seemed distant now. Oliver had a dazed look on his face as he stared at the tall buildings and then at the residential area. Everything reminded him of the past. He shook his head, and his eyes turned sharp. The nostalgia dissolved as his focus snapped back to the present, his mind once again on the mission at hand. He easily passed through crowds of people heading toward the central playground located north of the residential area. With his speed, it didn't take him long before he reached the playground. It was a huge park, of sorts, in reality. He noticed some people taking a stroll or just sitting while watching children play. Laughter and conversation filled the air, but none of it registered in Oliver's mind as he remained laser-focused on his surroundings. He walked around the park, and under the guise of his cloak, no one could see his hair or face, which helped him a bit. And with the cloak of darkness, in effect, ordinary people had an even harder time spotting him, much less noticing him. The cloak seemed to absorb the light around him, rendering him almost invisible to the casual observer. So despite looking shady with a cloak covering him, he was still able to inspect calmly. It took him half an hour as he toured every corner of the playground, trying to sense any abnormalities in anything around the park. But despite being vigilant and careful, he found nothing. Each sweep of his senses returned empty, the playground appearing frustratingly ordinary. Of course, it wouldn't be in the Black Codex Federation if it was so easy. Oliver had expected this outcome already. He was in the city mainly to fulfill the mission from Jenna to determine his rank in the organization. As for the clan mission? He could delay it, there was still plenty of time before the deadline approached. The weight of the mission wasn't pressing, allowing him to explore the city at his own pace. It was enough that he could roam freely around for a good amount of time. Oliver shook his head. His lips pressed into a thin line as the familiar feeling of dissatisfaction crept in. It was indeed difficult. For a normal exorcist. Chapter 202. It would have indeed been a difficult mission for a normal rank 1 to sense and identify the abnormality, however, he was different. The world around him shifted as he stared at the park. Colors dulled and sharpened in his vision, while shapes morphed subtly, revealing hidden layers beneath the surface. His eyes flashed in a mysterious color as everything was revealed to him. The trees, the people, the very air itself seemed to shift in his vision as hidden truths were laid bare before him. Every pulse of energy, every unseen current in the atmosphere became visible, threads of power weaving through the ordinary scene. He could see through everything, and just by standing in one corner, he was able to see the entirety of the park. It didn't matter if there were trees or people in between, his eyes could see past everything at a glance. It was as if the physical world was a mere veil, easily peeled away by his gaze. It was like peeling away layers of reality, exposing what lay beneath the surface. He slowly observed the signs of abnormality, and his eyes narrowed as he witnessed something interesting. A cold smile curled at the edge of his lips, the faintest hint of satisfaction flickering in his expression. Without lingering in the park any longer, he returned to the hotel. His footsteps were light but purposeful, his mind already racing ahead to the next steps. He had found something interesting. underscore 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 underscore. At the Mystic Purge clan. Sigh, what a chaotic situation. Jenna thought, her fingers lightly drumming the armrest, a distant look in her eyes as she considered the events unfolding. She leaned back in her chair as she gazed out of the window, her eyes distant, as if observing something far away. The sunlight filtering through the window cast long shadows on the floor, but her eyes seemed to see far beyond the confines of the room. Still, who could have expected that his sudden departure would make them this restless? Her voice was soft but carried a note of amusement, as if she were privy to a game only she could see. Her lips curled slightly as she spoke, a knowing smile playing on her face. She stroked her chin and had a meaningful look in her eyes. Each movement was deliberate, her mind calculating the possibilities with the precision of a seasoned strategist. Does that mean they were already aware of the abnormal potential in that boy? Or did they realize this recently? Given the recent arrangement, it seems they found out during the demon hunt event. She smirked, her face as beautiful as a piece of fine jade. Yet behind that beauty was something far more dangerous, a mind always scheming, always 2 steps ahead. There was a sharpness to her expression now, like a blade concealed in velvet. She tapped the armrest of her chair and said aloud, "Go and take advantage of the situation. The Supreme Elders have all been in closed-door seclusion since the last century. Now is the perfect time." Her voice was a quiet command, laced with a calm authority that brooked no hesitation. As she looked outside the window, a black shadow of a man emerged behind her. The shadow moved with an unnatural fluidity, its form shifting briefly before solidifying into the shape of a man kneeling. The shadow knelt and answered, "Yes, madam." It disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Like smoke dissipating into thin air, the figure vanished, leaving no trace of its presence. Jenna still didn't turn around, but in the next moment, a purple metal appeared in her hand. If Oliver were here, he would have easily recognized the metal as the same dark artifact he had sold to her long ago. The metal of eternal pain. Oh, how I wish I could act now, but no, there's still some time. Her voice dropped to a whisper, filled with both longing and restraint. Her slender fingers grazed the metallic surface of the purple metal as she whispered. The cool metal sent a faint vibration through her fingertips, but her expression remained unchanged. Unexpectedly, the boy gave me something important for my revenge. My plans have accelerated significantly thanks to this. Her eyes darkened as she spoke, the weight of her words heavy with intent. She gazed at the metal, the potent dark aspera radiating from it seeming to have no effect on her. This dark aspera, known to have driven countless people mad, was ineffective in her hands. Compared to this, some void dust is a fair trade. Still, I am quite curious about what he needs such a thing for. A glint of curiosity flickered in her eyes, though it quickly gave way to calculation. She pondered deeply but could not come up with anything. Void dust was not something simple. It was found in mysterious black rocks that sometimes fell from the sky. Not only was void dust a very powerful material, but in the hands of an exceptional alchemist, it could turn into something phenomenal. Obtaining void dust was not easy, but for her, one of the top executives of the Black Code Federation, it wasn't a resource she lacked. Her position ensured that even the most elusive materials were within reach. This was also why she had easily agreed to Oliver's request. Nonetheless, after Oliver left the clan, the information was quickly sent to the top elders in charge of handling the missions, causing a stir in the department. The swift transmission of information triggered a chain reaction, the ripple effect of his departure spreading quickly through the ranks. It was no trivial matter that one of the heirs was so easily assigned a mission without anyone being aware of it. A thorough investigation was already underway to identify the cause of it all. Of course, she had already cleared all traces relating to her beforehand, so no matter what, the investigations would never lead back to her in any way. She had covered her tracks meticulously, like a spider spinning an invisible web around her actions. Now, she was curious if the clan would act as she had expected or do something else. Her fingers drummed the armrest again, her mind racing with possibilities. Did you find it? An old man sitting in a leather chair in a beautifully decorated office questioned the middle-aged woman in front of him. Did you find it? An old man sitting in a leather chair in a beautifully decorated office questioned the middle-aged woman in front of him. The dim light from the chandelier overhead cast shadows across the polished wood, giving the room a somber yet grand ambience. The office was lavish yet subdued, its decorations reflecting both wealth and power without being ostentatious. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with ancient texts and artifacts, each one a silent testament to the elder's influence. Elder, the person who issued the mission, has already been taken into custody, and upon investigation, he confessed that he was unaware the other party was a main heir of the clan. The old man raised a brow at her words and could not help but frown. The deepening lines on his face looked like cracks in stone, a testament to years of hardened authority. The lines on his face deepened, his expression hardening as he absorbed the information. He didn't know who the other party was and still issued the mission, he asked coldly. There was an icy sharpness in his tone, each word calculated to pierce through the woman's calm exterior. His voice had an icy edge to it, each word cutting through the air like a blade. The middle-aged woman calmly explained, "Yes, Elder. It's as illogical as you think, however, we have properly and thoroughly investigated the man." Her tone was measured, carefully choosing her words to hint at the darker methods of interrogation used. Upon hearing the woman's words, which carried a hidden meaning, the old man wore a thoughtful look. His fingers tapped lightly against the arm of his chair as he considered her statement, the implication not lost on him. He knew better than anyone how terrifying the clan's interrogation force was. Even the strongest would immediately cower and beg to confess everything. The memory of past sessions flickered in his mind, screams, broken wills, and secrets dragged out under duress. They were quite notorious in the clan, and it was known that even elders could not easily resist their interrogation. The memory of past interrogations flickered through his mind, a grim reminder of the power the clan held over its members. "So? What is your conclusion?" he asked, wondering why the woman had come to him. She was only ordered to appear before him after she had figured out who the person was and why he did what he did. His tone was clipped, expecting efficiency. He didn't have time for anything less than clear answers. "Yes, I have concluded that young Master Oliver used an artifact when he appeared in the mission hall." The woman's eyes gleamed with certainty as she revealed her findings, her voice steady, unshaken by the elder's imposing demeanor. "An artifact?" The elder raised a brow. This was something he had also suspected after hearing the woman's words. His curiosity piqued, though his face remained as unreadable as stone. "A decent artifact. I believe its functions were primarily focused on stealth and deception, which enabled the young master to sneak out of the clan as well." Her explanation was concise, but beneath her calm exterior, she felt a slight tension, knowing that the elder expected nothing short of precision. The elder simply hummed, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. "From what I heard from my subordinate, that does seem to be the case." She was the first to see through his cover, however, young master ordered her not to interfere and to leave. He had also told her that he would return after finishing his work, which, obviously, he didn't do. By subordinate, he was referring to the exorcist woman Oliver had met earlier, who had seen through his disguise at the time. As expected, she ratted him out as soon as she left. "Yes, Elder." "What are your orders?" the woman asked, seeking guidance on her next course of action. Her voice was measured, betraying none of the nervousness she felt standing before such a powerful figure. "The great elder is in seclusion at the moment, so we cannot disturb him. I dare not inform Madame Ophelia about this matter either, lest I face her wrath. Our first objective is to locate young Master Oliver." He paused, picking up a pen and scribbling some words on a nearby sheet of paper. The scratching of the pen was sharp in the still air, the elder's focus on the note uninterrupted. The mission assigned to the young master by the clan administration was to eradicate some demonic ghosts in this city. Assuming he left some days ago, he should have arrived by now. Dispatch a team to find young master and bring him back as soon as possible. He spoke sternly as he stroked his beard. "Understood, Elder." The woman responded seriously, I will personally handpick my best subordinates and have them escort the young master back to the clan as soon and as safely as possible. You are dismissed then. The elder waved her off with a flick of his wrist, his attention already shifting to the next task at hand. Achoo! Oliver sneezed and wiped his nose. A sudden gust of cold air brushed past him, sending an involuntary shiver down his spine. He had just been thinking about a certain fat white cat when he sneezed. What everyone didn't know was that he wasn't in the city mentioned in the mission. Instead, he was actually in a city far away from it, the city of Harlington, where he was to complete the mission from the Black Codex Federation. He had 2 missions, one from the clan and the other from Jenna. The latter was more important since it would determine his hierarchy in the organization. I have made sufficient preparations. It's time to create the sword of negativity. His eyes turned determined as he looked at the sun slowly sinking beyond the clouds, a faint blanket of darkness slowly covering the sky. The fading light seemed to herald the approach of something darker, more ominous. Chapter 204. The fading light seemed to herald the approach of something darker, more ominous. However, today was clearly not the night when the moon would rise. It was a moonless night. Oliver patiently waited as he leaped onto the hotel's roof and stood there, gazing at the sky without moving. The vast expanse of stars above him remained concealed by the thick, clouded sky, casting the world into a deeper, more unsettling darkness. The cool night air brushed against his skin, but he remained motionless, his focus unwavering. He watched as the sun disappeared, and the darkness thickened by the moment. The last traces of light were swallowed by the creeping night, leaving behind an oppressive silence that seemed to envelop everything. The world below grew quieter, the city's lights flickering on one by one as the night took over. The hum of distant traffic faded into the background, and the soft murmur of people moving about the streets became almost non-existent, as if the city itself was holding its breath. It's close. His voice was a whisper, barely audible, as he felt the aspera around him shift. He murmured to himself as he leaped off the hotel's roof, heading out of the city. His feet barely touched the ground, his movements swift and fluid, blending seamlessly into the shadows that draped the narrow streets. His body moved swiftly, the ground a blur beneath him as he pushed forward into the night. There was no spot in the city suitable for creating the sword of negativity. He didn't want to risk causing irreversible damage to the city or getting noticed by the major powers outside. Of course, with his identity as the young master of the Mystic Purge clan, no one would dare trouble him openly. But power drew attention, and he wasn't ready for curious eyes to pry into his affairs just yet. But he didn't want to stand out so brazenly, and he certainly didn't want anyone disturbing the process of forming the sword of negativity. He quickly passed through the city gates, easily bypassing the guards by using his cloak to hide his presence. The guards stood lazily at their posts, completely unaware of the shadow slipping past them, as if the night itself had swallowed him whole. The faint shimmer of the cloak enveloped him, making him blend seamlessly into the shadows. He appeared some distance away from the city. The darkness will soon reach its peak, and that will be the signal to start. His voice was steady, filled with anticipation as he gazed at the horizon where the last remnants of twilight had long faded. Oliver didn't hesitate any longer and took out the void dust from his mind space. The air around him seemed to shift slightly as if recognizing the ominous power he was about to unleash. A thick pouch filled with glowing black sand appeared as he occupied a spot in front. The black particles glittered faintly in the moonless night, their glow almost otherworldly, casting eerie reflections onto the surrounding ground. Taking out the void dust, he started spreading it onto the ground, arranging the void dust exactly as he had learned. Each grain of dust fell with precision, as though he were weaving together the threads of a grand, cosmic design. First, he drew a circle, then proceeded to make complex structures inside the circle, as if he were drawing a runic design. The shapes and symbols he traced into the ground began to pulse faintly, an ancient rhythm that seemed to resonate with the deeper forces of the universe. It became incredibly complex as he kept spreading the void dust onto the ground. However, with the knowledge firmly sealed in his memories, he had no problems arranging the patterns on the ground slowly. Finally, an extremely complex array was finished, and no sooner did Oliver place the last bit of void dust to complete the structure, it started to react, and a deep, unsettling energy began to gather on the surface of the circular array. The darkness was now at its peak, and everything was darker than ever. It was a suffocating kind of darkness, one that swallowed sound and light alike, leaving only the presence of the malevolent energy building beneath him. Oliver noticed these changes and quickly took the next step. His heart quickened, not out of fear, but with the thrill of what was about to unfold. Following the guide in his memory, he did not hesitate and stepped inside the circular array, walking up to stand at the central point. The unsettling energy intensified and began to seep directly into his body without hesitation. It was cold and heavy, like a flood of ink pouring into his veins, filling every corner of his being with its oppressive weight. A deep chill emerged from the depths of his heart as he felt the ominous negativity gathering in his body. His breath hitched slightly as the coldness spread, tendrils of darkness curling into his mind, whispering thoughts not entirely his own. It seemed to affect every part of him, be it his heart or his mind. Usually, with such terrifying negative energy entering someone, they would lose control of their mind, and their heart and mind would be corrupted by intense negative emotions and dangerous thoughts. But who was Oliver? Abyss energy flooded every corner of his body as if it were his own blood, directly covering the negativity that was gathering and suppressing it. The dark energy wrestled against his own power, but Oliver's control was absolute. The abyssal force within him surged forward like a tidal wave, crashing over the negativity and bending it to his will. This allowed Oliver to maintain a strong hold over the negativity. Oliver noticed that the negativity was extremely overbearing, confirming what he had suspected. The source of negativity was born from the invisible part of the universe. It felt ancient, primal, as if it had existed long before the stars themselves had begun to burn. Chapter 205. The universe was divided into two ends, positive and negative. Oliver felt the divide as if it were a chasm stretching endlessly beyond what his eyes could see, a separation that no mortal could ever hope to cross. The people who resided in the positive region could not detect or see the things belonging to the negative region, they could only perceive its existence. Such was the case with the other side as well. This was similar to how matter and antimatter were speculated by people to represent the opposing ends of the universe, two halves of a whole, constantly at odds, bound by laws far older than the stars themselves. Opposites that could never touch, separated by an unseen divide that even the greatest of powers could not cross freely. The two regions, positive and negative, could never interact or meet. The forces at play were far too great, the consequences too cataclysmic. This was the core principle of the universe. When matter and antimatter come into contact, they annihilate each other and release a large amount of energy. A cosmic dance of creation and destruction, one that had shaped the universe as it was known. This process was termed annihilation by the people of both sides. The negativity required to create what Oliver wanted came from the other side of the universe. It wasn't just energy, it was the raw, unfiltered force of the negative side, an element that defied comprehension in the positive world. As far as he knew, he was in the positive region of the universe and therefore required a medium to draw in the negativity, the power from the other end. The circular circuit beneath him worked as a channel for that. The lines of the array pulsed faintly, their energy humming in tune with the void dust scattered across the ground. With void dust, known to have formed from the shards of void, used as the material to create the array, it helped him establish a firm connection to the negative side of the universe. This also had another benefit. Since people in the positive region of the universe could not easily detect negativity, it gave him a way to conceal any abnormal activity that might occur. He still took precautions by performing this in an isolated location to prevent any variables. No matter how confident he felt, there was always room for the unexpected. The world outside was none the wiser to the forces he was manipulating. To them, the night was just another moonless one. Oliver patiently accumulated the overwhelming negativity into his body as time passed with every second. Each second stretched longer, the pressure within him growing heavier, yet strangely, it felt like it belonged, a part of him being reawakened. Each moment felt like an eternity, the pressure mounting inside him as the negativity flowed deeper into his core. It filled every crevice of his being, like water seeping into cracks, except this water was darker, colder, more dangerous than anything he had ever experienced. The night was still and silent, allowing a strange sense of synchronization to occur between his body and the overbearing negativity. The rhythm of the universe seemed to slow, syncing with the pulse of the energy now coursing through him. Oliver observed the negativity condensing within his body. The blackness swirled and coiled inside him, a living force that bent to his will, ready to be shaped. It was both chaotic and controlled, like a storm he held within the palm of his hand. With the strange synchronization he now felt with the negativity, he began to take action, shaping the form of the negativity as described in the method from his memory. The night continued as Oliver became immersed in the process, forgetting everything else. Time lost its meaning as he focused entirely on the energy inside him, every thought directed at molding it into the weapon it was meant to become. The stars slowly became visible in the sky as time passed, and a strange scene occurred, unnoticed by Oliver. The constellations above seemed to twist and shift, faint lights flickering in patterns that had not been seen for centuries, as though the universe itself was reacting to the power being called upon below. It was as if the cosmos were whispering, shifting in their ancient positions to witness the birth of something long forgotten. A soft ethereal white light that seemed to belong to the countless stars above fell onto his body at the same time as the negativity was filling him. The light wrapped around him like a gentle veil, contrasting sharply with the dark energy coursing through his veins. From below, there was an endless stream of black negativity, while from above, a steady stream of pure white starlight fell on his head. The forces collided within him but did not fight, somehow, they intertwined, each one respecting the other's presence. Both energies seemed to envelop his body while he was busy condensing the weapon inside. The air around him crackled with potential, an invisible storm raging within the confines of his being. It was a mystical scene. A cosmic dance between light and dark, life and death, all contained within the solitary figure of a boy drawing on powers beyond comprehension. Phew! Oliver broke out of his trance-like state and was startled to see bright sunlight falling onto him. His vision blurred slightly, adjusting to the sudden shift from the deep, infinite darkness to the blinding warmth of day. He squinted as the light filtered through the leaves of the trees he was standing beneath. He looked down to see the array circuit had also disappeared, as all the void dust had been used up after serving its purpose. The ground bore no sign of the immense power that had just coursed through it, leaving only the faint memory of the ritual that had taken place. He leaned against the tree and slowly sat next to it, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead, indicating the hard work he had done. His muscles ached, the toll of channeling such energy settling in, but a sense of accomplishment washed over him. But a small smile was etched on his face as he beamed, finally, it's done. Chapter 206. Finally, it's done, Oliver smiled slightly and whispered. He glanced at the city far away and stretched out his hand, muttering a call. The world seemed to still as he whispered the name. The world around him seemed to pause, the air itself holding still as though bracing for what was about to emerge. Negligentus. In the next instant, a pulsing black sword suddenly emerged from the void into his hand, seemingly out of nowhere. The atmosphere crackled faintly, distorting around the sword's dark presence, as though space itself recoiled from its arrival. The air around it warped slightly, the weapon's presence disturbing the very space it occupied. The sword oozed an unsettling feeling all around it. Its mere presence seemed to sap the warmth from the air, leaving behind a cold, oppressive aura. It hummed faintly, as if alive, its dark aura spreading like mist from the blade's edge. It was pitch black with a terrifying, blurry construct. It looked as though the blade was constantly shifting, like shadows swirling in an endless void. It was as if Oliver was holding a sword made of steam, not material. Just the look of the sword was enough to give chills to even the veterans among veterans, masters among masters. There was an ancient malice about it, a power so old and dangerous that anyone in its presence would instinctively know to fear it. However, something was odd about the sword. The hilt of the sword, the place where you hold it, was pitch white. The pure white hilt seemed to glow faintly, an ethereal light that stood in sharp opposition to the darkness of the blade. The stark contrast between the shadowy blade and the pristine hilt was almost jarring, as though the weapon itself carried within it the balance of light and dark. It was a paradox in form, two forces that should not coexist, yet here they were, bound together in a single object. Just pure white, and unlike how the sword's body gave off a dark and dangerous vibe, the white hilt emitted a holy feeling and an unprecedented warmth. It was as if the hilt had its own separate life force, something ancient yet pure, standing in stark opposition to the malevolent energy of the blade. It felt wrong, yet right, a weapon born of opposites, holding both salvation and destruction within its form. The two energies seemed to pulse together, a strange harmony of chaos and order. Tracing the white hilt with his fingers, it felt more like he was touching a piece of warm, smooth jade. The warmth spread from his fingertips, a comforting heat that traveled through his arm, in contrast to the cold, predatory sensation the blade exuded. His fingertips tingled slightly, the warmth from the hilt spreading through him, as though the sword was recognizing its new master. He moved the sword closer to him and felt a strong connection with it, resonating with his very being. It was more than just a weapon, it was a part of him, an extension of his will. Something that would grow with him from now on. It was as if the darkness of the sword was trying to swallow the space around it, the air seemed to tremble vividly. Even the light seemed to shy away from the weapon, bending around the blade's dark form as though afraid to come too close. The very stars above seemed dimmer, their faint glow unable to penetrate the sword's shadowy aura. Oliver couldn't help but take a deep breath as he took in the majesty of the sword. His chest swelled with both pride and awe, fully realizing the magnitude of what he had just created. Not to mention, he felt a very strong resonance between his soul and the sword, a faint yet firm feeling. It wasn't just a tool, it was as if the sword had its own consciousness, one that mirrored his own in some way. It was as if they were two parts of a whole, bound by an unspoken understanding, their fates now one. He felt the power of the sword. It was unimaginably powerful and terrifying. A raw force that could obliterate anything in its path if unleashed. The energy radiating from the blade was so intense it felt as though it could tear the very fabric of reality if unleashed. But something left him confused. Why was there a pure white hilt on this pitch-black sword? And instead of the eerie feeling the sword's entire body gave off, this white hilt instead gave him a holy and pure feeling. It was almost soothing, like the comforting presence of a divine being, completely at odds with the dark, destructive energy the sword radiated. Did he do something wrong? This was his first thought when he looked at it, but he discarded the notion. He had followed the exact steps and methods from his memory, so there was no way it was his fault. Everything had been perfect, every line of the array, every grain of void dust placed with precision. There was no mistake. So, he simply put the matter to the back of his mind for the time being. He would figure it out when the time came naturally. There were greater concerns ahead, and whatever mystery the sword held would reveal itself in due time. He willed the sword to disappear, and in the next moment, it vanished into thin air, as if it had never existed in the first place. But only he knew the sword was close to him, closer than anything. He knew the only distance between him and the sword was his call to it. The sword was bound to him now, a silent shadow that would follow him wherever he went, always ready, always waiting. After resting for a short time, he returned to the city, now fully prepared to complete his mission perfectly. His steps were lighter now, his body rejuvenated by the strange, potent energy that still lingered in his veins. He didn't go back to his hotel, instead, he headed toward the playground. The night's events had sharpened his focus, and there was no time to waste. The mission awaited. Chapter 207. City of Harlington, Back Alleyways. Just like any city in the world, the city of Harlington had its own slums and dirty alleys where criminals, thugs, or other antisocial elements resided or were active. The narrow, twisted streets seemed to swallow light, leaving only shadows where danger lurked at every corner. The air here was thick with the stench of decay and desperation, where the line between life and death was razor thin. The smell of rotting garbage and filth permeated everything, mixing with the occasional distant wail of someone too far gone to be saved. These were often lawless zones where sometimes the cost of life became cheaper than a loaf of bread. Here, morality was a luxury no one could afford, and a human life was traded like currency, cheap and easily spent. In these shadowy corners, power ruled, and mercy was a forgotten concept. The weak either learned to hide or were devoured by the strong, leaving nothing but bones and empty promises in their wake. Only the strong and skilled survived in such areas of poverty. And even the strong rarely survived without scars, physical and otherwise. In one of the old shabby houses, there was a moment of disturbance. The faint sound of wood creaking underfoot broke the stillness, a subtle shift in the oppressive silence. The house stood out even among the dilapidated surroundings, its broken windows and sagging roof a facade for something far more sinister within. It was a place that seemed to sink into itself, as though the weight of the sins committed inside had made the very walls bow in despair. Inside the house, there wasn't much except for some cheap, old furniture. Dust-covered shelves and tattered curtains lined the walls, giving off the illusion of neglect, though the real activity lay just beneath the surface. The air was stale, thick with the scent of dust and mildew, though the real danger lay hidden beneath the surface. An air of unease clung to the room, as if it was haunted by the malicious intentions of those who frequented it. However, this was all just a front, an artificial makeover to imitate the other houses in the alleyway. The dingy exterior and rundown appearance were carefully crafted to mislead prying eyes, ensuring no one looked too closely at what really went on behind closed doors. Beneath the worn floorboards, the truth simmered, hidden from prying eyes. It was a trap, a facade hiding the dark web of schemes and plots brewing underneath. Under this shabby-looking facade, two people stood next to each other. One appeared to be holding a long piece of paper, while the other held a shiny rock. The paper was old and weathered, its edges frayed, but the writing upon it still pulsed with dark energy. The rock in the other's hand gleamed ominously, glowing faintly with power, as though alive in its own right. The dim light from a single flickering bulb cast long shadows across the room, giving the scene a sense of unease. The shadows seemed to dance along the cracked walls, their jagged edges crawling up toward the ceiling, twisting and contorting as if mimicking the thoughts of those present. If we manage to do it this time, we will be even closer to our goal than before. The woman's voice cut through the silence, sharp with anticipation. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped the paper, her excitement barely contained. The woman's voice was filled with urgency, her eyes gleaming with ambition as she stared at the paper in her hands. The flickering light cast eerie reflections in her eyes, making her look almost feverish, consumed by the promise of what was to come. It was the voice of a woman who spoke, indicating one of the two was a woman. I'm sure we will. We've been delayed because of those bastards from the Unholy Sun sect. Look what happened in the end. Now there's not a trace of their past glory. The man's voice was low, tinged with bitterness. He spat the words out, his grip tightening on the rock as if imagining it was one of the sect members. Humph. They must have gotten too complacent with their new young recruits. Offending not one but all 5 major clans together at once? Even demons dare not pull such a stunt. Her lips curled into a sneer, her disdain for their recklessness clear. There was no sympathy in her tone, only the cold satisfaction of seeing someone else's downfall. I know, still, I feel it's a bit weird how they suddenly targeted the clan and got erased so easily. There must be a reason they directly reached out to attack the clan heirs. He furrowed his brow, suspicion creeping into his voice as he pondered the chain of events. Something about it felt off, as if there was a missing piece to the puzzle. No use thinking about it. We don't need to concern ourselves with that matter, we have to do our job as told. Her voice was sharp, cutting off his train of thought. She had no interest in distractions, only in what lay ahead. You're right. With the recent surge of exorcists around the normal human cities, security has tightened everywhere, and our actions have become even more restrained. Fortunately, we finally got this chance. The man spoke in a desperate tone. His hands tightened around the shiny rock, his knuckles white with tension. It's all thanks to those dumb idiots who went ahead and got themselves killed, making the clans actively hunt for heretics everywhere. Those exorcists are like mad dogs, once marked, they won't leave. Gosh, so annoying. The woman spat the words out, her eyes flashing with irritation as she paced the room. The woman huffed in annoyance. Well, don't stress too much. This city is still kind of backwater compared to others, and the people here have differing opinions on the existence of exorcists, so it shouldn't be a problem for us to fetch a high quantity of souls. The man's voice was calm, almost too calm, as if he'd already made peace with the chaos to come. Chapter 208. The man assured her in a serious voice. The woman was silent upon hearing him and nodded. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, though the fire in her eyes remained. You're right. I always feel baffled by the foolishness of these humans. To have opinions about exorcists? That's so ridiculous, haha. Her laughter was sharp, edged with cruelty, her voice dripping with scorn. The man continued reading the scroll in his hands, as if lost in thought. His eyes flicked over the ancient symbols, each one sparking a new plan in his mind, his focus unshakable despite the woman's mocking tone. What he mentioned just now was a widely known fact. Not only did normal humans not have favorable impressions of exorcists, but it was also simply impossible for them to have one. Some people refused to acknowledge that exorcists even existed. Those people were the ones who had never faced any danger and spent most of their lives in the confines of the highly secure, modern cities near the capital. Then there were those who felt the need to keep the exorcists in check, given the huge differences in power and mentality. To them, exorcists were too powerful, too separate from the normal human experience. They feared what they could not control. To such people, exorcists should be treated more as tools of war than humans, their sole purpose being to serve normal humans. It was a ridiculous notion, but the Exorcist Union never bothered with it and continued doing what it wanted. Anyway, the majority of the population viewed the exorcists favorably, so it wasn't too big of an issue. Well, who are we to care? Thanks to these fools, there isn't a single exorcist in the entire city. We've been planning this for well over a year by now. Once it's released, the entire city will become lambs ready for slaughter. You're right. Before the exorcists are even notified, we will have long accomplished our goal, ha ha ha. The woman let out an erratic laugh as she said this. Ah, I can't wait. With this number of souls, we can definitely revive our Lord. There was a glint of madness in his eyes as he spoke, his voice thick with obsession. The weight of their long-awaited moment hung heavy in the air, suffocating in its intensity. The man had a hint of longing in his words, and the woman remained silent, her eyes fervent with emotion. Her hands trembled ever so slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline coursing through her veins. They had been planning this for a long time, keeping track of the city to ensure that no exorcists got a hint of their presence, or that if any passed by, they would leave without noticing anything abnormal. It was only recently that they had become confident about their plans and reached the final stage. Now, the finishing touches were in place, and all that remained was the final, devastating blow. This did cause some problems with the common folk, but it was nothing too serious, just some nightmares and the disappearances of some insignificant people. People no one would miss. Faces forgotten by the world, swallowed by the dark alleys and backstreets of the city. In cities like these, the forgotten were the easiest prey. They disappeared without a trace, their existence barely acknowledged by the bustling lives of those in more prosperous areas. These incidents would at best be reported to the local authorities, and the police would soon forget about them as well. Just another name scrawled in a forgotten ledger, another case left cold. Another missing child, another nameless victim swallowed by the city's dark underbelly, just another day in the lawless parts of town. So they had been a little more aggressive lately. Time was running out, and the need to complete the ritual gnawed at their nerves. The sooner they completed the process, the sooner they could revive their Lord and rebuild their sects. Desperation had driven them to take bolder risks, their movements more frantic with each passing day. Then it's about time we start? The woman's voice cut through the tense silence, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Indeed. It's time. The man's response was calm, but his voice held a note of grim finality. Both of them glanced at each other as the woman sat cross-legged in the room and closed her eyes as if meditating, while the man retrieved a broken skull from nowhere and placed it in front of her. The skull, cracked and ancient, seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as if it had a will of its own. Upon closer look, it had weird runes etched on the bony exterior. The man started to chant in some unknown language, and a runic array began to form beneath the skull. The symbols glowed faintly at first, but soon the room was bathed in a sinister light, the air around them thick with dark magic. The two of them soon became immersed in their process. Their breaths synchronized with the rhythm of the chanting, each word spoken with purpose, as though unlocking something hidden deep beneath the surface. Underscore 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 underscore. Meanwhile, far from the sinister rituals taking place in the alleyways, Oliver had just arrived at the playground that was supposedly cursed. The air here felt heavy, thick with an unseen tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He looked around. There were still some people there at that moment, parents chatting as their children played, blissfully unaware of the danger that lingered just beneath the surface. He made a quick call to the local police station, and soon someone picked up. The distant sound of the city faded as Oliver focused on the voice on the other end. Harlington Police speaking, may we know your issue? A feminine voice sounded from the other end. Her tone was polite, but there was a hint of weariness, likely the result of dealing with countless routine calls. Oliver took a deep breath and said, his voice firm and authoritative, completely unlike his usual self. I am an exorcist dispatched by the Mystic Purge clan and am currently in the city. Chapter 209. He heard some rustling sounds through the call before the voice came again. A quick shuffle, the urgency of the situation finally sinking in, as if the weight of his words had dropped like a stone into the calm waters of their routine. Yes, Sir Exorcist, what can we assist you with? This time, the voice had changed, it was that of a man. Clearly, the operator had immediately forwarded the call to her superior after hearing his claim. There was a sharpness now, a readiness in the tone, as if the mention of exorcist had snapped the team into focus. The shift in tone was immediate, from casual to tense, as if the very word exorcist had sent a jolt of realization through the station. The man on the other end was no longer speaking to just anyone, he was talking to a member of one of the most feared and respected groups in existence. Although it was a bit reckless to suddenly trust the other party based on a call alone, only a few dared to joke about such matters, and the punishment for pranksters was severe. No one, not even the most brazen of criminals, would dare impersonate an exorcist and risk the wrath of the clans. No one took an exorcist lightly, especially not in times like these. There were too many dark forces lurking just beyond the light of civilization, too many dangers that only exorcists could face head-on. Come over and clear the playground in the north. Have all the civilians evacuate the premises right now. I am about to perform an exorcism. His voice remained calm, but there was an underlying urgency in his words, a subtle command that brooked no argument. An exorcism. The police chief on the other end of the call, upon hearing the word, had a tense expression. His heartbeat quickened, his grip on the phone tightening as if the very word had sent a chill down his spine. His heart skipped a beat, and he looked a bit dazed. He knew what it meant when an exorcist was about to perform an exorcism somewhere. It meant the place was infested either with demonic beings like ghosts or something related to heretics. Both possibilities were equally terrifying. Demons could tear apart the very city itself, and heretics, well, they had a way of twisting the world around them into something unrecognizable. Both were threats that no normal police force was equipped to handle. They could barely deal with regular criminals, let alone the supernatural horrors that exorcists faced daily. Being on the deeper side of the human continent, there was no way a ghost could sneak past, so it only meant one simple thing. Heretics. The word echoed in his mind like the tolling of a funeral bell. There were heretics in the city. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. It was the kind of news that could shake an entire city to its core. And since an exorcist deemed it necessary to take action and personally perform an exorcism, It could only mean that the heretics had been active in the city for a long time, operating under their noses. His stomach churned. His mind raced as he tried to comprehend how something so dangerous had slipped past them unnoticed. It had reached the point where an exorcism was needed to keep the people safe. That meant the threat was already far greater than they had ever anticipated. The gravity of the situation settled in, a cold sweat breaking out across his brow. His expression turned grim as he realized the playground in the north. The place where families gathered, where children played, blissfully unaware of the darkness creeping toward them. The department had received some reports from there recently about abnormal activities and mysterious disappearances of children. Missing posters had been plastered around the city, but no one had connected the dots, until now. But they had concluded it was a missing persons case, and some officers were investigating it. Standard protocol for a city like Harlington, chalk it up to runaway kids or unsolved abductions. Who could have thought it was related to heretics? The realization burned in his chest like acid. They had been blind to the real danger all along. If this matter came to public light, his position would be in grave danger. The city's trust in his leadership would crumble. He could already see the headlines, his career in ruins. "Are you still there?" Reply. Oliver's cold voice sounded from the other end since the chief officer had not replied. It cut through the chief's rising panic like a blade, snapping him back to the present. Yes, sir. I will personally mobilize every available personnel and come to your aid right now. The chief's voice wavered, but he forced strength into it, knowing this wasn't the time for hesitation. Fast, Oliver said and hung up the phone. The abrupt end to the call left the chief staring at the receiver, the weight of the command still hanging in the air. The chief held his face for a moment, feeling frustrated. His fingers pressed into his temples, trying to massage away the anxiety building inside. No matter what, since an exorcist had called for assistance, as per the laws and conduct of human society, they must aid them to the best of their ability. There was no room to think about other things now. The clock was ticking, and lives were on the line. He was shocked how he, an experienced officer, was panicking so much right now. Where did all that training to remain calm in such situations go? He could not help it since the topic related to heretics and demons made even the bravest sweat cold buckets. He quickly ordered his force to be ready and rushed to the location where Oliver was. The sirens blared as police cars sped through the city streets, a sense of dread filling the air. They quickly reached the scene and immediately started escorting the citizens still loitering around in the park out. There were a few homeless beggars hiding under benches and other places. They were directly removed from the park. Even the most stubborn were pulled away, their protests drowned out by the urgency in the officers' voices. Chapter 210. They were under orders that no one was to see what was about to happen and that they must maintain a distance from the playground and park. Whatever was about to unfold here was beyond anything they were equipped to handle. The officers had felt it in their bones, a primal instinct to retreat, to leave this business to those who could face such horrors. Even the officers on duty didn't dare linger for too long after ensuring there was no one left in the playground. The unnatural quiet that followed sent a shiver down their spines. They didn't need to be told twice to leave. This wasn't a horror movie, and they weren't main characters. They were simply ordinary people trying to survive in a world filled with extraordinary threats. No matter what, they were still ordinary folk and could not withstand demonic beings on their own. They weren't armed with holy relics or mystical abilities, just badges and uniforms. They didn't have the confidence to deal with such supernatural phenomena. They had seen enough reports to know that when an exorcist was involved, it was best to get as far away as possible. Exorcists didn't just deal with criminals, they dealt with things that could tear your mind apart, or worse, your soul. Oliver was nowhere to be seen, which led to some confusion. The police chief at the scene couldn't help but call him back, to which he simply replied that they should not bother him anymore and evacuate themselves as well. The chief was restless, however. His nerves were on edge, a low hum of anxiety vibrating through his body. His hands twitched at his sides, his instincts screaming at him to stay. Being the person with the highest authority in the area, he had the responsibility to stay back and assist if needed. So, he ordered his subordinates to leave first and maintain a distance from the playground, prohibiting any citizens from wandering close to it. Their hurried footsteps echoed in the empty streets as they rushed to comply, eager to put distance between themselves and whatever was about to happen. Only he remained near the playground, waiting for the exorcist to appear. He still had to ensure that the caller was authentic by meeting Oliver in person, otherwise, wouldn't they have wasted all their efforts and time? Minutes stretched into eternity as the police chief was feeling more uneasy. He spotted a small, lone figure walking toward him. The figure moved with purpose, a silhouette too small and deliberate to be one of the wandering homeless. The silhouette indicated they were just a small child. But how could a kid slip past the guard of his subordinates and enter without them noticing? His mind scrambled for a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. Naturally, he felt inclined to believe the identity of the other person was what he expected. Still, doubt gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. Could this really be the exorcist he had spoken to? The one who claimed to be capable of performing an exorcism so dangerous? Who are you? Didn't I ask everyone to leave? The childlike voice was undoubtedly present. The boy's features came into the light, creamy white hair and brightly shining blue eyes. He was, without a doubt, a kid. An extraordinary kid. The chief's breath hitched. The police chief could just tell. There was something about the way the boy stood, the way his eyes seemed to take in everything with a calm indifference. The intensity around Oliver made him instinctively feel that way. Despite the other party being a small child with a harmless appearance, the chief still felt oddly vulnerable, as if standing in front of a predator. There was something predatory about the way the boy carried himself, as if beneath that innocent face was something far older, far more dangerous. The chief felt as though he was staring into the eyes of a creature that had seen more than a lifetime's worth of battle, someone, or something, who knew the darkest corners of the world. "Sir, are you the exorcist?" He mustered up his courage and asked. His throat tightened as the words left his mouth, the question hanging in the air between them like a weight. Oliver nodded. His movement was so small, so restrained, it barely registered. "Didn't we just talk about it?" His response was flat, emotionless, but carried with it a weight of authority that left no room for doubt. "Yes, definitely. It's just that there haven't been any exorcists in this city for many years, and I always imagined exorcists to be, nothing, sir." The chief's words fumbled out awkwardly, his mind still grappling with the contradiction before him, this childlike figure, and the immense power he could sense underneath. The chief's words stumbled out awkwardly, the sight before him clashing with everything he'd ever thought an exorcist would be. The chief didn't know what to say to him, so he paused hesitantly mid-sentence. Was it offensive to point out the childlike features? It wasn't just the strangeness of seeing a kid in this role, it was the sheer disconnect between what he expected and what was standing in front of him. He wasn't sure what the protocol was in this situation, but he sure as hell didn't want to offend the boy standing before him. He was contemplating if it would be offensive to comment on the childlike features. As an ordinary human, he was not familiar with exorcist customs. If he mistakenly offended the exorcist, he would only be sowing unnecessary trouble, which he clearly didn't want to do. The tales of those who had insulted or crossed exorcists lingered in the back of his mind, none of them ended well. Moreover, it could be that the other party was in disguise. With the strange and bizarre methods of the exorcists, he wouldn't be surprised if there was an old man under the child's skin. Oliver glanced at the restless officer and knew what he was thinking. He was not unfamiliar with such glances. During the auction, there were multiple people who had doubted and tried to confirm his identity. He was helpless in this matter and could only wait to grow quickly.